Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Botpress Basics Office Hours. If you're new here, my name is Robert. I host these office hours once a week. We go through some of the usual Botpress things. Maybe we cover what's new this week. We've got a lot new this week, which is really exciting. But we'll cover some interesting things, some fun stuff. I do have a very specific task planned for us today. And I'm not going to beat around the bush. So the task I have planned for us today, if you follow us on YouTube or any of the other short form video content platforms like TikTok and Instagram, you might have seen we talk about like an office assistant. And I thought it might be fun today to actually build that assistant itself. And so we can actually see how someone like me who is interested in deploying this kind of chatbot in like an office setting might go about doing that. So that's the plan for today. We'll see how that goes in the kind of half hour, 45 minutes that we have together. But as usual, if there are things you want to see or questions you have, please leave them in chat. As always, I'm always reading it, so I've got my eye on you. If you're watching the recording of this on YouTube in the future, come join us live sometime if you're interested, if the time zones work for you. I stream on Tuesdays, Patrick streams on Thursdays. It's a good time. Hi, Robert. Hello. Okay. So as usual, perhaps I'll begin by providing like some backstory or, okay, hang on. First, I will have to address the elephant in the room, which is that look how nice the studio looks. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I saw Sid in the chat. Sid and the rest of the team, great job. It looks beautiful. Very subtle, but like very elegant and beautiful improvements. I love to see it. The colors look a lot nicer. The interfacing with it just feels better. These kinds of floating windows look really great. The fact that maybe these are somewhat transparent now, so the opacity is lower. Just everything feels a lot cleaner and more organized, but also I love the way it looks. It's pretty. I lack the UX UI terms to say what I love about it, but it feels nicer, which I think is right. I've been looking forward to today's stream since these changes went live. I haven't had a chance yet to play around with the studio since it looks a lot nicer, or looks a lot improved, enhanced, we might say. So I've been looking forward to doing it this way. Have the live streaming times been moved to a later time? So my streams are on Tuesday afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then Patrick streams on for developers at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursdays. So we're accommodating multiple time zones. You know how it is. I did used to do them earlier 5 weeks ago, but I am very much a night owl. So 3 p.m. is like when I begin to have energy in my life, and then we go from there. I'm assuming some of you can relate. But okay, let's start building. I promise we're gonna build today. So the brief for today, and actually I'm gonna write all this down in a comment node, which I did last week, and I quite liked the way that it kept me organized. Because I have a tendency to, well, you all know, I have a tendency to wiggle about, as it were. So the brief for today is I want to build some kind of office assistant. What I'm going to say is I'm going to model this after the experience that we have at Botpress. So maybe I'll walk you through what that means. 3 p.m. is not late enough. Try 9 to 10. If I could stream at 9 p.m. I would, but unfortunately I have other things to do. So the brief for this is we've got an office here in Montreal, and we've got an office in Quebec City, and we've got employees kind of all over the place, not just in Quebec, but equally like in America, in other parts of Canada and other parts of the world. So what that means is that we've got a lot of people coming and going in the office at all times, and we don't really have anyone in the office whose sole purpose is to make these people's experience coming into the office more convenient, right? We've all got stuff to do, but we don't really have like an office manager role. That's not really someone that we have on the team at the moment. And so in place of that, or like maybe supplementing the people that we currently do have, what I want to see is can I provide those people coming in from out of town, for example, with access to resources like just the kinds of simple questions that you might ask. If you work from home or you're a remote worker who goes into the office sometimes, I'm sure that you have lots of questions similar to the ones that I have, for example. And so I'm going to see if I can support those people. So the types of questions that they have are things like they're kitchen related. So I'll sort these into broad categories. So they're usually like there's a whole section of questions about the kitchen. There are questions about like maybe getting into the office, like arriving, tech for getting in, that kind of stuff. So we'll see that. So kitchen, we have getting into the office. Maybe tech might be like its own question, like questions about monitors. I ask a lot of questions about that, and like cables and the various cables and whatnot. And there might be some other ones, of course. Maybe as I'm thinking, let me catch up on chat. Ooh, I just noticed the comment nodes are have rounded corners now. Thank goodness. That's so nice. I see questions about the Instagram and WhatsApp integrations. That's well beyond the scope of my office hours streams. These are really for like people that are new to Botpress or people that are looking to build basic bots. So what I would say is if you have questions about the integrations, we have videos of them on our YouTube channel, but equally you might ask questions about to Patrick on Thursday streams. He focuses on integrations, which are really more focused on developers. The YouTube channel for Botpress is youtube.com/Botpress. If you just search Botpress, you'll see my face there. Okay, so kitchen, getting into the office, tech. Maybe I'll include something about like accommodation, because that's usually that's a classic question. And then Sabrina, you were just in the office. You were just visiting. Do you have questions in addition to these kinds of categories when you're visiting for work, when you're traveling around? I know you've worked in a lot of different cities. As I'm thinking about that, I see there are questions on chat that I have to catch up on. The AI task in the knowledge base, Piga. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I see your question. Hacks for improving the knowledge base answers. There are a couple of videos on our YouTube about like integrating the AI task in the knowledge base, creating a knowledge bot, those kinds of things. So first I would urge you to give those a watch, particularly like those longer ones, equally the ones where I'm going over this in a live stream. You might find those helpful because I've done this in the past as well. But I will also say that we're currently reworking. We've received a lot of feedback on things like the AI task and knowledge base queries. So we're reworking these kinds of things to give more reliable or better answers, or basically make it do what you would like it to do. That's kind of like the large answer to this question. I see, as always, I see several people are typing, which always gives me the heebie-jeebies. Do people still say that, the heebie-jeebies? I'm not really sure. I don't know if heebie-jeebies is things, maybe I'm showing my age here, but in any case. Okay, so our office assistant, perhaps... I missed your question and I heard my name. That's okay, Sabrina. We'll carry on. I think I'm going to look for one last category, and maybe I'll just do food because people will want food recommendations always. That's a very common question. Okay, so the brief for today's project is I want to build an office assistant that can answer questions about these categories of thing that people coming into the Botpress office, or really any office from out of town, will be able to answer. So I'll begin by greeting my user. As always, I'm just going to pop the greeting in a standard node. And actually, this came up at the end of last week's stream, and I was really inspired by this question. RTG, I don't know if you're here, but you asked me last week how I imagined people interacting with the bot that I built, the college productivity assistant. And so maybe off the top here, I'm going to say, I imagine sending the shareable widget out to people like last time, so they can kind of have that link bookmarked on their phone, and so they can just pull it up whenever they're interested. Am I sharing my screen? Have I not been sharing my screen this whole time? Oh, goodness. That's funny. I will say, if you're watching the YouTube recording of this, you will have seen my screen this whole time. All right, I'll give you all a few seconds to catch up on what I've jotted down here. GPT-4 can get an image and sound inputs. When will it be available in Botpress? Ooh, when will other models, GPT-4 and others, be available in Botpress? Perhaps the ability to bring your own key? It's a good question. And I appear to have, again, something stuck in my eye. We really got a dust around here. The serious answer is soon. But I've got too much dust in my eye. I can't give you a more specific answer than that. But it's a good question. Okay, so back to our bot, now that you can all see what I'm sharing, I'm going to relabel this node greeting because this is what I want to use to greet my fellow employees, my fellow coworkers who are traveling into the office. So I'll just say something like, welcome to, actually, Hanny, I don't know if Hanny's in the office. Hanny is the closest thing we have to the person in the office with all the answers. So I think I'll call this Hanny 2.0. So welcome to Hanny 2.0. Ask me your questions about visiting Botpress. And let's go from there. How do I integrate my bot to a website that I'm currently doing? Hey, Adriano, good question. We have videos on our YouTube channel about integrating with Botpress. So just popping the bot on your channel, on your website. As Sabrina's got you the video there are a couple of different ways to do that. You can pop the widget on the bottom right corner. If you've been shopping online recently, you're familiar with that interaction. If you want to embed the chatbot, we've also got tutorials for that on our website as well, or on our YouTube channel rather. So you can find your answers there. If I don't have a clear tutorial for you on integrating with Flowise, it's because it's not an integration. It would just be calling their calling the Flowise API. I don't know if there's a tutorial that someone from the community has written about integrate or using Flowise in that way. But when we say integrating, I specifically mean like things that you can find integrations for on the integration hub. So that's things like Instagram and Messenger. Little nomenclature for you there. In any case. Okay, so what I want to happen here, as usual, is I want to be able to segment the people asking questions on the topic that they want to ask a question about. And so what I don't want to happen, let's start with a negative example, is that if someone's asking a question about the kitchen, and that's kind of related to food, I don't want them to ask a question about the kitchen, but then get recommended a restaurant recommendation down the street, because that doesn't help them. So the way that we do this is we'll be nesting the various knowledge bases in folders. If you don't know what that means, don't worry, we'll figure it out together and I'll show you. But this is how I would go about doing this. So step number one, we want to segment our users. So I'm just going to ask them to make perhaps a single choice. And I'll ask them something like, or maybe like, what would you like to know about? Okay, yeah, accommodation's a good one. So I'll include that here. Very good, Sabrina, thank you. Okay, so what would you like to know about? And then pretty standard chatbot design. So if you're watching this, I'm assuming you're interested in kind of like the basics of it. So we'll go through it. But let's say you want to present your user with a bunch of different choices, and then you want to, at the end of those choices, have them pick one and then make them go down a separate conversational path, as we say. So I'll offer some choices here. And the first one, I'm just going to match these categories. So kitchen, getting into the office, tech, accommodation, and food recs. Here, I'll make that more specific and it'll be food recommendations. All right. Get out of here. Extra node, we don't need you. All right, so what I want to happen is whenever my user picks one of these choices, I want them to get sent down the relevant path, right? I want them to get sent down the correct place. Junior Dev asks, once the bot has been published, does the shared link work when changes has been done again to the bot? Excellent question. So the first answer is yes, it will always work. The shareable link won't change. However, it won't reflect the most recent version of your bot until you publish those changes. So until you're confident that those changes work and you're happy with them, then you hit publish. Otherwise, your users will be talking to the older or less updated version that was the most live version when they are interacting with it. So the last version you published, basically. So share gives you that link, and then publish gives you, makes your bot up to date, as it were. So you think of this as like saving your changes or publishing those changes. All your changes are automatically saved in the Cloud Studio. All right, so we want to send my user down different paths, but currently I have nowhere to send them, which means I need to create those flows for them. And in Botpress, that's called a workflow. If you're curious about workflows and you want to know more about them, I've got other videos about them on the YouTube channel, so you can do a deep dive on some workflows there. I talk about when you should use additional workflows and whatnot, but if you learn by example like me, then this is probably better for you. So I'll say I'm going to map a new workflow onto each of the options that I was creating earlier. So let me just rename some of these. Tech, I'll call this one accommodation, and the last one was food recommendations. So now what I want to happen is whenever my user picks one of these choices, I want them to get sent down this path. So I want them, if they click kitchen, I want to customize the kitchen conversation for them, which is going to have different information, of course. So we take our path, we drag it into our workflow, and instead of selecting any of these options like I normally would, you can now see a brand new one, which is called execute a workflow. And so what this does is this just sends that user to this workflow. So kitchen, we go kitchen. Getting into the office, I'm going to execute the getting into the office workflow. Tech, I'm going to execute the tech workflow. This is going to look like a mess for a sec until we clean it up. But don't worry about that. Accommodation, and then of course food recommendations and food recommendations. Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. Again, bot development best practice. It drives me nuts to see nodes disorganized like this, as I'm sure same for you too as well. So I'm just gonna make sure that everything lines up and looks nice, so that let's say I have a collaborator, perhaps Hanny, who wants to come in and edit Hanny 2.0. They can do so without being overwhelmed by the design of our bot. And I'll put my money where my mouth is, and I'll of course rename these nodes as well, just to again stay organized. Accommodation, and our last one is food recommendations. Okay, so let's recap. So all that we've done so far is ask our user, which category of question do you have? Is it related to any of these things? And once they pick one, they get sent down the relevant workflow. Let's pick one to start with. So I'll begin by editing the kitchen workflow. And this is kind of like the Botpress meat and potatoes, bread and butter, we might say. So what I want to happen here is I want my user to be able to ask a question specifically about the kitchen and get an answer that is relevant to the Botpress kitchen, and get an answer that is just for them. So first, of course, before anything else, we have to ask them a question. So I'll say, what would you like to know about the Botpress kitchen? The Botpress kitchen is really, it's fun. It's good times. If you're curious about what the Botpress kitchen looks like, I posted a video on our Instagram earlier yesterday that it was shot in the kitchen. So if you're curious about that, you can find it there. RBOna asks, if a user is communicating with a bot and on the other side we publish a new version of the bot, does the chat history get lost? Is something that we need to interfere and write a piece of code probably to prevent that? Ooh, excellent question. If I'm not mistaken, first of all, I don't believe that would change anything, because until your user refreshes or starts a new conversation, they're still in the old version of, they're interacting with the older version of your bot. The one before you've hit publish. However, I would recommend perhaps testing this out, because I'm not 100% sure, so do not hold me to that answer. But that's an excellent question. When you say, does the chat history get lost? I wonder, what chat history do you mean? Do you mean the one that they are currently experiencing from the user's perspective? Or do you mean the one that you can see as the bot owner? That's an excellent question. I'd love to see it. Okay. Yeah, so the one from the user experience. I don't think that would change, but perhaps I would also strongly recommend maybe giving that a test first, just to make sure. Okay, so now we have kitchen question. And how does my bot know anything about the Botpress kitchen? How is my chatbot supposed to learn anything about the Botpress kitchen, which it has no access to? Does it know anything? It doesn't know much. Of course, if you're a Botpress familiar, you're a Botpress veteran, you know that the answer to that is knowledge base. So I'll go ahead and add my knowledge base here using the add knowledge base button. And I'll add, what I just did was I added a title to stay organized, and I'm going to add a description. So I'm going to say, This lists information and frequently asked questions about the Botpress kitchen. Perhaps a little pro tip. What I would say here is the description is relevant to your bot's experience because it's going to look at the description of what is in your knowledge base and use that to kind of formulate its answers. So a lot of people ask things like, how do I make the bot? It's kind of like saying random things, or it's saying arbitrary things, or it feels a bit template-ish. And one solution to that is to be more specific in the places that you provide descriptions of your knowledge base. So for example, if you're providing a menu, you might call it a menu. If you're providing return policies, you might specify that this specifies return policies, for instance. So that's one of the many ways you can improve your bot's interactions with your knowledge base. But okay, so one of the questions I also get a lot, and that I see a lot, is that people will say things like, okay, in this example, so in the Office Assistant example, I don't have a PDF document listing all the stuff I know about the kitchen. Sometimes I just know these things to be true. It came to me in a dream, perhaps, and or I just know them from experience, but I don't have a PDF listing them out. So what the heck am I supposed to do? So this is like the dead simplest way to just build a simple replacement for Hanny, who again is the Botpress team member with the most answers about the kitchen, for instance. But you just build a plain document within the Botpress Studio. So you don't need a PDF, you don't need a CSV if you don't have that, if it's not relevant for the example that you're building at the current moment. So I'm going to say kitchen FAQs and facts. And so perhaps an example of something that we might put in here is something like the kitchen is located at the back right corner of the office, which is a question that I had when I first got here. I was like, where is the kitchen? Because, it's a very long office, and I need my coffee, as you all know. Very millennial of me to need coffee. But okay, so the idea here is we've created a knowledge base to go with our workflow kitchen. But perhaps you might be asking this question. We're going to have 5 workflows and 5 knowledge bases. But how does my workflow know to get the information from the relevant knowledge base? So how does my kitchen workflow, if I'm asking a question about the kitchen, how does it know to get information from the kitchen knowledge base without pulling information from something else? And the answer to that is, drumroll please, folders. So if you have never used a folder before in Botpress, beautiful tool to keep your left side panel organized and clean and efficient. So I'm going to name this folder, you guessed it, kitchen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to nest the kitchen workflow inside it, as well as the kitchen knowledge base. And so now this accommodation workflow, for example, won't be able to pull any information from the stuff that's nested inside this folder. And this is the beauty of Botpress. The beauty of this is that you can organize the information this way, and then it makes the project a lot nicer to work with and also to interact with. So let us recap. My user says, welcome to Hanny 2.0, or my user interacts with the bot this way. The bot says this. They're interested in a kitchen question, so they get sent down to the kitchen workflow, and then they get asked a question like, what would you like to know about the Botpress kitchen? And then they can receive an answer to their question, which is what we all want. So a couple of things. To make sure that your bot is going to be sending an answer, you must enable knowledge answering on a specific node. So what that means is once you see this book icon here, the knowledge agent, which is the thing that manages your bot's ability to pull information from a knowledge base, we just want to make sure it's enabled, because otherwise it's not going to do that. So we must see the book icon. That's great. And so now this is just a really simple, like, I have a question about the kitchen. I receive an answer for the kitchen. There are a couple of things you can do to play with the granularity of this kind of sending a message, receiving an answer workflow type of thing. So there are a couple of videos about that on our YouTube channel, like enable manual answering, which is withholding the answer in case you want to manipulate it, if you want to make it sound funnier, or if you want to shorten it, or whatever the case may be. There are ways you can do that. And so there are tutorials about that on our YouTube channel. But for now, I'm going to make it the simplest bot possible. Okay, and so what if my user has another question? Very simple. I'm just going to ask them, do you need anything else? Do you need anything else? And then of course, maybe I'll just make this a bit playful. So I've got more questions. Don't leave me here to die because I'm hungry in the kitchen. And then thanks, Hanny 2.0. I'm good for now. A couple of things here. Maybe this is my, again, 25 minutes into today's stream, but this is the soapbox that I will allow myself, the very first. There are two ways in Botpress that you can make a conversation more delightful. If you are as old as I am, which I won't tell you how old that is, but if you're as old as I am, you've been interacting with chatbots on the web for quite a while, and sometimes they're not always the best, or they weren't in the past, certainly. And so maybe the conversational experience has left some of us with something to be desired. There are two reasons for that I'm a lot of reasons, but I'll narrow in on two of them today. The first is that they can feel a bit robotic. They can feel a bit stale, like you are always getting asked or prompted in the same way. And it's very clear that you're talking to a robot, and that's no fun. What your robot lacks in that instance is personality. Right, the thing that makes a human, that the closest thing that we can get to describing a soul. We're not going to get spiritual on today's stream, but we're talking about personality. And so what we've done in Botpress is try to build that into your bot. So I'll just navigate over to the personality agent for a hot second. So here we see the personality agent lets you tell your bot what kind of bot it should be. And in practical terms, what this does is that whenever your bot is sending a message, you'll be able to tell it, your bot will take the instructions you've given it. For instance, you are a funny clown, for example, and it will rewrite all of the messages it sends as if it were a funny clown. And it does that on the spot every time. And so the exciting part about this is that your user could ask the exact same question twice in a row and receive fundamentally the same information. So in the example we're giving that the kitchen is on the right side of the office, but it's going to be phrased in two different ways for two different people because of the personality agent. So the personality is what's driving your bot to say something in a different way, which is fun. We love that. We want to increase the experience like it's interacting with a human. So that's the personality agent. The second is that previous bots would just they were kind of, I don't want to say dumb because that's not right, but this is like a programming. They weren't very intelligent in that they didn't do much beyond answering questions in this kind of button format. But now the interplay between you, the bot builder, and what your bot can do is a lot wider. The scope is a lot bigger, which is really exciting because it lets funky people, is what I'll say, inject some personality into your bot. So of course you can rely on the personality agent to do that. But I would always say, like, if you think you're a funny person, go ahead and inject some personality into the bot yourself. An office assistant doesn't need to be boring. Hanny certainly isn't boring. And therefore Hanny 2.0 certainly cannot be boring as well. Would it be practical to use the personality agent in fintech? Yeah, this is a great question. There are a couple of answers here. The first is that the personality agent doesn't need to be goofy or silly. Things can be delightful without sacrificing a modicum of professionalness or the ability to speak in a way that is perceived appropriate for like the financial sphere, for instance. So what I would say is, you can avoid saying things like, you are a fun or funky or weird clown that uses emojis, yada, yada, yada. But you can say things like, you speak very seriously, your tone is very matter of fact, you're very professional. And so you can actually use the personality agent to improve the messages your bot would send. So for instance, in the way that I think people are currently using ChatGPT to rewrite their emails to make them more professional sounding, I think you can think of this as kind of analogous to that. So it's a great question. The examples that I tend to lean on are funny or silly or delightful, just because that's the kind of person that I am. And frankly, I work for a startup, so things tend to be a bit more relaxed here. But equally, if you're working for like a bank or a legal firm, those kinds of things, if you're interacting with clients, their expectations are different, right? So again, returning back to the office assistant example, the people interacting with a bot called Hanny 2.0, or perhaps their expectations are that this might be like a funny or delightful experience, right? So that's the example I'm going with here. Okay, let us return back to our bot building. I'm going to just show you how I'm managing this conversation loop. So if they say I've got more questions, don't leave me here to die. They'll just get sent back to the beginning of this node, which means that they'll be able to ask another question. The cards in a Botpress node are executed from top to bottom. So whenever you see this path, for instance, here, they're now getting sent to the top of the node, and they'll get asked this question again, and then they'll get asked another single choice question. Let's say they say, thanks, Henny 2.0, I'm good for now. We can just do this, and then the exit here will send them back to the main workflow. It'll send them back to the main body of Henny 2.0. So let's see what happens here. And then we can customize the experience even further. And again, this is what I love. So think of if we were writing like an adventure story, and I'm thinking about this because I just finished rewatching all of the Lord of the Rings movies, and so my head is very full. But think of executing discrete workflows or separate workflows like this as going on a little adventure. So my user's entire journey is interacting with Henny 2.0 to get answers from my bot, but when they do each of these little nodes, they go through a little journey on their own, a little adventure. So they enter the kitchen node, they go to the kitchen workflow, they go on their little adventure where they get answers about the Botpress kitchen, and then pop, they're done, and they exit the workflow. So that's what's happening here. So they go in the kitchen workflow, they exit, and then they're right back here in the flow. I'm specifying this because I've seen a few questions on the server in the last couple of days about people asking things like, if I execute a sub workflow or an additional workflow, and I want to send them back to the main workflow, how do I get them there, or where do they end up? And so you'll notice here, on this execute a workflow card, you'll see exit. And so what this means is that when the user exits the additional workflow, this is where they end up. So you can think of this kind of like a tunnel, or in the Lord of the Rings journey, maybe this is them going to, I don't know, Weathertop or Rivendell or something. They've entered Rivendell, they've spoken to Agent Smith from the Matrix, and now they're over here. So I'm going to continue customizing the experience even further, and this is where I particularly like to have fun. And so then we can send something silly, like now that you've got your grub questions answered, what else is up? And so I want you to note what we've done there. So because I know they just finished in the kitchen workflow, I can answer based on that. So they've asked a question presumably about the kitchen. And so now I'm acknowledging this, and this is what makes the conversation feel more human. This has nothing to do with AI, by the way. This is just conversation design, which is a term that we use a lot often in this space. But the idea here is like, AI can do a lot of exciting things, but you are a human, and the best way perhaps, or one of the best ways to augment AI in designing good conversations is to ask yourself, what kind of conversation do I like to have? And a really good conversational practice is to acknowledge what the person before you has just said or done. So in this case, we know that they've asked a question about the kitchen, so I'm going to acknowledge that they received an answer about the kitchen. Great. So there are a couple of different ways we can go about this now. If I had more time, or if this was like a real project that I was implementing, I would go ahead and do the same thing for all of these nodes, but I'm not going to. You can just use your imagination to fill in that blank. But there are a couple of different things we can do. Here, you'll notice we're kind of at a crossroads. We're like Britney Spears in what was that movie, 2003? She was in a movie called Crossroads. In any case, we are Britney Spears in 2003, and we could end the conversation here. So we could allow our user to not ask another question and maybe refresh and talk to the bot again. Or we can draw a path from there all the way back to the beginning. Now, there are reasons you would or would not want to do this, but the idea here is like, if I have a question about the kitchen and then I've got another question about tech in the office, do I want to have to refresh the mobile page where I have the bot open, or do I want to do it entirely in one conversation? There's no right answer here. I think a lot of the time, sometimes you all want me to provide you with the correct or the best way to do something. It's a very natural habit to ask for like the best or the most optimal way to do something. But I want to encourage you all to unleash your creativity and sit on the throne of your own independence, because what might be right for you, or what might be right for Botpress in this instance, for example, might not be right for another conversation that you are designing. So in this specific example, I actually don't want to do this because I don't want them to get the welcome message again. And so I might think of designing something else. But don't think that just because I've said it, and I've got this great hairdo, no, I'm kidding. But don't think that just because I've said it, this is the correct or optimal way to do something. The optimal way to build with Botpress is to think of it as a tool that you're using in your own way. So we can provide you with advice and best tips and whatnot, but those are only ever going to just be best practices. So let's recap where we are. But before that, I have a question in chat. If the user stops asking questions for a moment, can we trigger the bot sending a question to keep them chatting in the kitchen? Yes, we can. There are a couple of different things here. Matt Pendle, I'm assuming have you interacted with the timeout workflow at all? Is that something you've seen before? Perhaps as I wait for you to answer, I'll just show you over here. If your user stops interacting with your bot for a set period of time, I believe the default is, anyways, the default changes often. But if your user, inactivity timeout 30 minutes, but of course you can adjust this to suit your needs. If your user is not interacting with your bot for a set period of time that you describe, default 30 minutes, it'll get sent automatically to this workflow, which you can see is blank here, so this would just end the conversation. But you can also add something like a message saying, hey, Henny 2.0 doesn't have all the time in the world. Are you still with me? This is kind of close to something Henny 1.0 would say in real life. No, I'm kidding. And so they would get sent to this workflow and receive this message. Timeout flow not working good with variables. Oh, see, the point here is because it's an additional workflow, it doesn't have access to the variables sent in other or created in other workflows. So it's not going to have access to things you've collected elsewhere. So user variables will work because it's a user variable, but a workflow variable won't work. So maybe let's remind ourselves about these. So the different scopes of variables are workflow ones, which are only available in their specific workflows, and then user variables, you can only set one of them, and they're available throughout they're available in every workflow. When I say you can only set one of them, I mean user.name, for instance, will be the same in every workflow. If you say not working now, that's interesting. I wonder why. I wonder why they would have been working today, but then something changed. What I would say is just you can screenshot your bot and then ask and help. Perhaps maybe just export the bot itself, or just include a report ID, report a problem, and ask in the help channel. That might be the most helpful way for us to help you debug what's going on. But there you go. Yeah, Sabrina's linked you with the channel there. Nice. All right, so to recap, we've created a really simple bot that you can do in like 20 minutes. I mean, I've been talking through this whole thing, but really this should take you, I don't know, 20 minutes, half an hour to do. Populate it with some of the most basic information. And then as your coworkers or your friends or whatever continue to ask questions, you can continue updating this, the knowledge base here with more up-to-date information. So there's no need for it to be, it's not like a one and done. You can continue editing this, no problem. And what I love about this is it's all contained within Botpress. So you don't need to create a PDF, write a PDF elsewhere, download that PDF. I mean, you can do all those things if you'd prefer. But I know some of you prefer writing directly in Botpress here, so that's what I would do. And so they ask their questions about this. And then you can include lots of other things, like let's take a look at some of the other examples. So, I know what I wanted to show. So let's say in the food recommendations workflow, there are lots of different types of information that you can collect, or you can display information in certain ways. But I think the way that most of you are familiar with are carousels. So what I would say is, like, I've got videos on the Botpress YouTube channel about displaying items in a carousel in a really fun and engaging way. So if you're providing information about like restaurants, for instance, what I would do is create a restaurant recommendations table, as well as a restaurant recommendations knowledge base. And what am I going to do when I create this restaurant knowledge base? I'm going to add a description. So this lists out relevant restaurant recommendations in the greater Montreal area. And what is the knowledge-based source for this? Well, of course, it's that table that we just created. And so what's going to happen here, if you pair this with the Botpress video on our YouTube channel, super stew. If you pair this with the video on our YouTube channel about creating carousels based on information in a table, what you can do is you'll be able to display those restaurant recommendations that you have for your friends or your colleagues in a programmatic way, which is really exciting. So I'm going... Is that exciting? Maybe I'm playing it fast and loose with the word exciting, but it's certainly powerful. So I'm going to just make sure that we nest everything in the relevant folders. So of course we have the food recommendations workflow, the restaurants knowledge base, and the restaurant recommendations table. And so now we've got a bot that can do some pretty funky and cool things. It can provide information about the kitchen that we have complete control over. It's not going to pull information from like a random blog post in 2009 when getting recommendations for restaurants. It's going to get stuff that's like vetted by you because of course you're the one that put it there. Let me catch up on chat for a sec. If you have questions about, I see the Viber integration. Those are questions that are either better suited for like the help channel on our Discord or maybe Patrick streams on Thursdays. I don't really talk about integrations here because they're kind of beyond the scope of this audience. So that the people that watch these, that hang out on these streams, we're here to do, we're just getting started. Is there a way that a node with an AI transition always scans the user text to detect harmful language? I wonder what you mean by always scans the user texts. You can always just scan the last thing your user has sent by using the event.preview variable. You can find information about that variable here in the quick reference guide. So this is references the user's most recent message, and you can attach an AI transition to this to make sure that they're identifying what you are describing as harmful language, for instance. But I wonder if you have maybe like a more specific example of what you're trying to accomplish. In the meantime, there are a couple of different ways that you could maybe end the conversation with this bot. Of course, using the conversation end workflow. But the idea here is we focus a lot on our channel about things like e-commerce or customer service, and that's great. Botpress bots are really good at that. But something that I found helpful lately is that you can just use them as like a productivity tool for yourself. So it doesn't need to be in like just an e-commerce environment. It can really streamline your ability to answer and ask questions from other people, which is really the bread and butter of Botpress, right? Is like, I have knowledge that is not Googleable, right? I cannot Google where in the Botpress office our kitchen is, but somebody at the company knows this. And so this is having worked in many places for a while and having done a lot of different things. I think most of you will agree that one of the biggest bottlenecks in most projects or tasks is that somebody has access to information that you don't. And you have to ask that question. You have to ask that person. And if that person is busy, say they're in a meeting or they're out for that day, you've got to wait 24 hours, which is kind of stinky, right? Like it's not that great. It's not that great of an experience. And so if we can streamline that process, not by creating another like note-taking app or creating another I want to say like wiki or company knowledge database, but actually making those databases or making that company knowledge more accessible to you. That's kind of the idea here. What I've shown you here is just a really simple example of that. So if you were, let's say Hanny was out on vacation that week, but you still wanted to get like information about how to get your monitor set up at the office, you would be able to do that without having to, I don't want to say bother someone else, but ask another person for that. So again, earlier when I mentioned like the beauty of building with Botpress is that you can sit on the throne of your own independence. I really encourage you to think about the ways that you might use a Botpress bot outside of the ways that we outline on like our channel and stuff. We're always pushing the boundaries of what bots can do. I think perhaps to the chagrin of our engineering team who are like, it was not meant to be used that way. But as you all users of software know, we like to color outside the lines, as it were. I'm going to wrap up in a couple of minutes. And so if anyone has any burning questions that they wanted to ask before the end of this week's stream, please go ahead and ask them now as I catch up on chat and whatnot. I mean an AI transition card that always has its hands over every node, if that is understandable. I think I understand what you mean. The the current way that we've set up AI transitions in the transitions card is not a kind of global setting. So I think what you're looking for is a global setting that's going to listen at every turn and detect harmful language and then stop the user's conversation or send them down a certain path. That doesn't currently exist. There are a couple of different reasons, I think, why it would be difficult to implement something like that. And also it would interfere with, for instance, let's say that you had intent set up on a card already, so an AI transition, but then you had the global setting on as well, and the global setting detects something which will supersede the other. I think there's probably a way that you could figure this out. But that's a feature that currently doesn't exist in Botpress at the moment. If you've got ideas about the implementation of that, or if you want to talk more about this feature, I will say we have a feature request channel on the server. So if you want to ask a question there, this seems like an appropriate place for that discussion. Otherwise, I will continue on. Can you get the user's time zone from the bot? I need this to confirm timestamps while composing the proper response. Yes, you can, I think. You'll have to do this through the execute code card. But if you, and again, I will admit, giant disclaimer, we are outside of my wheelhouse here because I am not a developer, but the execute code card will let you pull information from your user using JavaScript. So if you Google, this is what I would do. I would Google JavaScript how to get current date and then go from there. That might be completely wrong, in which case, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm sorry. And to Aman, if you're the person who asked this question, if that's wrong, I'm also sorry. But that's where I would start. You certainly have to do this with the execute code card. You cannot do this with an existing card in Botpress in the Cloud Studio. Would it be easy to integrate a knowledge base to make.com? I mean, easy is a very relative term, which we will stay away from. Lots of things are possible within Botpress. The API is exposed in such a way that you can do things with it if you have the knowledge and the desire to. I don't know if that makes it easy, but it certainly makes it possible. You have buttons single choice on Coco Chat Now that are on top of the bot like a menu. How do you do that? Again, I would say ask the question in help and maybe show the example. Because I'm not really sure what you mean by this. But maybe just show the image in help. And Rohan, who is the person who developed Coco Chat Now, will usually be able to help you out with questions like that. All right. It is the end of today's stream. Thank you all for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed building the beginnings of Hanny 2.0 with me. What I will say here is follow Botpress on Instagram and TikTok. They are things that I'm having a lot of fun with in the office lately. Perhaps, again, much to the chagrin of my coworkers who come into work every day and don't want to be filmed. But alas, love is pain and sacrifice or whatnot. Otherwise, I hope you all have a beautiful, wonderful week. Thank you all for tuning in. And I'll see you next Tuesday. Otherwise, I'll see you on Patrick's stream on Thursdays at 11 a.m. or elsewhere around in the world. All right. Bye, everyone. Happy bot building.